You walk out to the shed on a cool morning, and there it is. The axe head you left leaning against the wall after the rain. The hatchet that came home damp from a hunting trip and never got dried. The handsaw with the orange crust creeping up the blade. The shovel by the back wall. The cast iron skillet on the high shelf you forgot to oil. The truck frame, the brake lines, the wheelbarrow, the gate hinge that squeals. Rust. The slow eating of your good iron by the air itself, one season at a time, until a sharp, clean tool your father handed down to you is a flaking ruin you either throw away or pay a man to fix. Most folks fight rust the way the hardware store would like them to. A little bottle of rust converter, $15, $20, $30 for a small jar. A spray can that lasts a few months, and then you buy it again. A brand new tool to replace the one you let go too far. Year after year, paying and paying, watching your good iron turn slowly to powder. Now I want you to sit with this for a moment. There is a fine powder you can buy for about $3, mixed in a cup of water, right there on your kitchen counter, that does a thing almost no one believes the first time they watch it happen. You brush it onto the rust, and the rust itself turns into a hard, dark, blue-black coating that protects the metal underneath. The rust does not just stop. The rust becomes the protection. The disease becomes the cure. And that is not me being poetic with you. That is plain chemistry, written down in the books since the year 1813. My name is Elias Yoder. I am Amish, and I farm here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. I am going to be honest with you right from the start, the way I always am, and especially today, because the claim in the title of this video is a bold one, and you deserve to know what holds up plain and what holds up only with a fair word of explanation. Folks will tell you this makes iron rust-proof forever. That is the bold claim. The truth, which I am going to give you straight, is actually more useful than the boast. It stops your rust in its tracks. It turns that rust into a protective coating, and it gives you metal that needs a small touch-up maybe once a year, instead of new rust eating it down to nothing every single season. That is what forever really means here. A thin coat once a year instead of throwing the tool out in a few years. Honest is more useful than impressive. And once you see it work with your own two hands, you will not go back to the old way. Stay with me. Let me first tell you what is really happening, because once you understand the simple chemistry of it, the rest of what I show you will make plain sense. Rust, that orange flaky stuff eating your iron, is what happens when iron meets water and air and slowly turns into iron oxide. The metal loses its tight, hard form and becomes a soft, crumbly compound that just keeps spreading. And here is the cruelty of it. Once it starts, it does not stop on its own. Rust feeds rust. The orange creeps wider and deeper year after year until the tool finally gives way in your hand. Now there is a thing in nature called tannin. Some folks call it tannic acid. It is the thing that makes a cup of strong black tea taste dry on your tongue, and what makes a red wine pull at your cheeks, and what makes an oak gall and a chestnut hull bitter to the bite. It is what the old leather tanners used in their oak bark vats to turn a raw animal hide into shoe leather. That is exactly where the word tanning comes from. Tannin is everywhere in the forest and everywhere in the pantry, in oak bark and tea leaves and grape skins and pomegranate rinds. And here is the small marvel of it. When tannin meets rust, the two of them grab hold of one another in a kind of chemical handshake, and that orange, flaky rust converts into a brand new compound called ferric tannate, a dark blue-black coating bonded tight to the metal underneath. Hard, stable, and most important of all, no longer eating the iron the way the rust was. The very rust that was destroying your tool becomes the seal that protects it. This is real, well-documented chemistry. A French chemist by the name of Henri Braconnot wrote it up, plain as day, clear back in 1813. The Canadian Conservation Institute, the very folks who restore iron artifacts in the great museums, things they mean to keep safe for hundreds of years, they have published this same exact procedure as their standard method. The museums use it. The military has tested it. The peer-reviewed papers spell it right out. This is not folk magic. It is honest chemistry that has been sitting in the books for over 200 years. And the same compound the museum man uses to protect a 1,000-year-old iron sword for the next century is the very thing you are about to mix in a plastic cup for $3. The same dark blue-black you have seen on antique ironwork that has lasted 300 years on somebody's porch, that is ferric tannate. The same near-black ink in a medieval handwritten Bible that has held its color for 800 years, that is iron and tannin, the same chemistry at work. Tannin and iron have been protecting one another longer than anyone alive can remember. Most folks have simply never been told the name for it. Now I owe you the honest scope of what this works on, before you go and try it on the wrong thing and feel like I lied to you. Because while folks out there will tell you this works on any metal at all, the plain truth is different and more useful. This works on iron and steel. That is what rusts orange, and tannic acid only does its handshake with iron. So your axes, your knives, your hatchets, your hand tools, your cast iron pans, your truck frame, your trailer, your wheelbarrow, your wood stove door, your gate hinges, your toolbox, your nails and bolts, your old farm machinery, any honest old iron and steel. All of these the powder does its work on. But it does not do this on aluminum or brass or copper or zinc or stainless steel or anything galvanized. Those metals corrode in a different way. They do not make orange rust, and the tannin has nothing to grab onto. Brush the powder on aluminum and you will get nothing at all for your trouble. So when you reach for this, reach for it for honest iron and steel. And that is most of the rusting things in your shed and your barn and your house anyway. Nearly everything that rusts that orange color. Know what it works on and use it for that. That is honest. The bold title says any metal. The honest farmer teaching you says iron and steel, which is most of what rusts and most of what you own. Now let me show you what to buy and how to mix it, because the parts are simple and cheap, and you can have everything you need with one online order or one trip to the hardware store. First, tannic acid powder, food grade. This is your main ingredient. You search that exact phrase online and you will find it in a good many places. Small bags, 100 grams or so, for $3 to $5. That one little bag treats roughly 40 feet of rusted metal, which is most of a small farm's tools, an entire truck frame, or all the ironwork around a house. One bag lasts most folks years. Second, a small jar of phosphoric acid rust remover. The hardware store calls it naval jelly, and it runs $2 or $3. This is your helper. The tannic acid alone does the main job, but adding a little phosphoric acid makes the conversion go faster and deeper, and it turns any leftover rust into a second protective compound called iron phosphate. The conservation studies and the military tests both confirm that together they work far better than either one alone, so get both. Third, distilled water, not tap water, and hear me on this. A gallon at the grocery store is $1. The reason matters. Tap water carries minerals and sometimes chloride, and chloride is the very thing that makes iron rust worse in the first place. You do not want to fight your own chemistry with the water you mix it in. Distilled is clean, and it lets the powder do its work. Then a foam brush or an old cotton rag to put it on with, a few cents. Some steel wool or a stiff wire brush to prep the metal first. And rubber gloves and eye protection. And I will say a plain word here because the phosphoric acid in that naval jelly is a real acid, and it will sting your skin and your eyes if you are careless with it. Wear the gloves, wear the safety glasses. Work in a spot with some air moving through. This is not lye, but it is not water either. Treat it with respect. That is the whole shopping list, $5 or $6 altogether, for enough to treat every piece of rusted iron you own, with powder left over. Now here's how you mix it, plain and simple. Take a clean cup or a small plastic container. Pour in about 100 milliliters, which is just a little under half a cup, of warm distilled water. Stir in about 4 grams of the tannic acid powder, which is close to a level teaspoon. Stir it until it dissolves, and the water will turn the color of strong black tea, a dark brownish shade, the very same color as the bark it came from. That is right, that is the tannin. Then stir in about a teaspoon of the naval jelly, the phosphoric acid. The mix may darken a little further or stay about the same, and either way is fine. That is your formula. About 3% tannic acid, a touch of phosphoric, in distilled water. It is what the museum books call for, and what the conservation folks have leaned on for over 200 years. Now to use it. First you prep the metal. Take your stiff wire brush or your steel wool and knock off any loose, flaking rust, the orange bits that come away in your hand. But do not sand it all the way down to bare, shining metal. That is the mistake most folks make, and it is worth stopping on. The tannin needs rust to react with. Without any rust, it has nothing to grab hold of. So you remove only what is loose enough to fall away on its own, and you leave the firm rust right where it sits. That firm rust is exactly what becomes your protection. Then brush the solution evenly over the rusted surface. A foam brush, an old rag, a clean paintbrush, any of them work. Cover every rusted spot. And now you watch. Within 10 or 15 minutes, sometimes a little longer, the color begins to shift right there in front of you. The orange darkens to brown. The brown goes to gray. The gray deepens into that blue-black. That is the ferric tannate forming. That is the chemistry working in real time, where you can stand and see it happen. The first time you watch it, you will hardly believe your own eyes. Folks who see it the first time all tell me the same thing, that there is something deeply satisfying about watching the rust itself turn into the protection. Let it dry all the way, 2 to 4 hours, depending on how warm and dry the day is. The surface turns that final dark blue-black, dry to the touch, and hard. Then you put on a second coat, and this part is important. The conservation experts are plain about it. Several thin coats work much better than one thick one. A single thick coat can flake off. 2 thin coats, each one dried fully before the next, build a denser, better bonded layer. So brush on the second coat and let it dry another few hours. Then finally you top it off. For your tools, your axes, your knives, anything your hands are on all the time, rub on a light coat of boiled linseed oil or a little melted beeswax. For a vehicle frame or a truck undercarriage, use a rubberized undercoating spray over the top. For a cast iron skillet, you simply re-season it in a 350-degree oven with a thin coat of oil, the same as you would season any cast iron. That top coat is the final weather barrier. The ferric tannate stops the rust, and the linseed oil or the beeswax keeps the water off the surface from then on. That is the whole procedure. 45 minutes of real work spread across an afternoon. $3 of powder, and a tool that was quietly eating itself alive is now sealed and protected. Now I owe you the honest words about how long this holds and what its true limits are, because this is where that word forever in the title deserves a fair explanation. For most outdoor and tool use in normal weather, the coating holds a long time, years for many tools. That blue-black layer is hard and bonded and does not simply wash off in the rain. The cast iron pan stays dark and seasoned. The axe head keeps its finish. The wheelbarrow stops eating itself. For tools that get heavy use, or that live outdoors year-round, you give them a small touch-up about once a season. 20 minutes, the same brush and the same coat, on whatever spots have started to dull or wear thin. Once a year, 20 minutes, out of the same bag of powder you bought a decade ago. Where it does have honest limits is in the harshest conditions. Sea air heavy with salt, or roads laid thick with salt in winter. There the coating breaks down faster, and you will need to redo it more often than once a year. But understand, salt is the enemy of every kind of metal protection there is, not just this one. The same truck frame in dry Pennsylvania weather, and that same frame in a salted coastal town, will never last the same length of time on any treatment ever made. That is not a flaw in the tannin, that is simply the nature of salt. And one more honest scientific word. There are some studies that say tannic acid all by itself, used on heavily contaminated rust without the phosphoric helper, does not bond as tightly as folks once believed. That is exactly why the combination, tannic acid plus phosphoric acid, the way the museum books and the military tests both do it, is the way I have shown you here. The two together, put onto clean, well-prepped rust, are far more reliable than either one on its own. Honest is more useful than impressive. The formula I gave you is the one that is held up under the closest scientific looking at. So when I say rust-proof forever, what that really means in plain farmer's English is this. It stops the rust right now. It turns that rust into protection, and with a small once-a-year touch-up, it keeps your iron in good order for as long as you own it. That is a great deal closer to forever than a spray can that lasts 3 months, and it costs about $3. Now I want to take a moment because this is the part that truly matters. Think about what you just learned. A powder, $3 a bag, that does the very same job as a $15 jar of branded rust converter sitting on the hardware store shelf. Pick up that jar on your next trip into town. Turn it over. Read the ingredient list on the back of it. You will see the very same words, tannic acid, and sometimes phosphoric acid. The same chemistry, in a smaller container, with a brand name printed on the front and 10 or 15 times the price. How can that be? The honest answer is the same one I keep coming back to on this channel. There is no money in selling a man a $3 bag of powder that lasts him years and treats his whole farm. There is good money in selling him a $15 bottle of rust converter every spring, and again every fall, and again next year. The hardware store has no sign hanging over the aisle that says, "Here is the same exact thing for less than a quarter of the price." The branded company runs no commercial telling you to go look for the raw ingredient instead. So the plain powder sits over on a different shelf, in a plain bag with a long chemical name on it, and most folks walk right past it, because nobody ever told them what it does. And I will be plain, that is not some grand conspiracy, and there is no villain in it. It is simpler and sadder than that. A system that makes its money on you not knowing has no reason in the world to teach you. So the old knowledge of the blacksmiths and the leather tanners and the museum men and the simple country chemists has quietly stopped being handed down, and the hardware aisle has taken over the teaching. My grandfather would never have called this an Amish secret. He would have called it what it plainly is, ordinary chemistry that good farmers and good craftsmen simply used to know. The bag has been sitting on the shelf the whole time. Most folks have just never been told to ask for it. You are being told now. So here's what I want you to do this week. Order a small bag of food-grade tannic acid online, $3 to $5. Pick up a jar of naval jelly at the hardware store, $2 to $3. Grab a gallon of distilled water at the grocery, $1. Then find the rustiest, honest piece of iron or steel you have got. An axe head, a hatchet, a cast iron skillet, an old shovel, a handsaw, a toolbox, a gate hinge. Put on your gloves and your safety glasses. Mix the formula. Knock the loose flakes off with steel wool. Brush that dark tea-colored solution onto the rust, and then just stand there and watch it happen. See the orange turn to brown, the brown turn to gray, the gray turn to that deep blue-black, right while you watch. The first time you see it, you will understand exactly why the museum folks use this same chemistry on the iron artifacts they are trying to save for the next 1,000 years. And that same powder in your hands will save your good iron for the rest of your life, with one small touch-up a year. Tell me down in the comments, what is the rustiest tool you have been meaning to bring back? the axe, the saw, the cast iron pan, the truck frame, the wheelbarrow? And once you have tried it, come back and tell me what you saw when the rust turned dark right there under your brush. Because the first time is a thing most folks remember. I read every single one. Next time, since we have been talking about saving the good iron and steel you already own, I am going to show you the old way my people sharpen and re-edge a dull axe, a dull knife, a worn-out pair of shears, so that a tool you thought was finished comes back better than new with nothing more than a stone, a strop, and 10 minutes of your time. It is the natural next step after today. Do not throw the rusty one away. Bring it back. The powder is on the shelf, and the chemistry has been waiting for you the whole time.